Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
You can tell a lot about a company by where it invests. At ConocoPhillips, we're investing in Arctic science and engineering at the University of Alaska Anchorage. And we're supporting today's students and tomorrow's engineers at UAF. In fact, today, more than 100 of our employees are University of Alaska graduates, and our future is in their hands. We happen to think that's a pretty good investment. ConocoPhillips, Alaska's oil and gas company.
The National Weather Service.
Everyone, thank you for joining us for Sunday's show. Taking a look at the satellite imagery, a lot of clear skies out over the Gulf of Alaska. Of course, nothing but sun today across the entire southeast coast, as well as up over much of the interior, all of the southern interior here, crossed right out to the Bering Sea coastline here. A lot of clear skies, which actually extended all the way out to St. Paul and especially St. George Island today. You can see the back edge of the clouds right up here at 4 a.m. You can also make out a couple of bands of moisture. Actually, this first one, a cold front, which back farther to the west yesterday, really slowed down as it came up against a big area of upper level high pressure that had been sitting over the eastern interior for the last week. And that allowed that other one to catch up to it, coming back, trailing back right through here. No weather associated with that here south of the Brooks Range, but some snow going on, light snow areas of up there across the North Slope and back along the eastern Arctic coast, and just northwest winds and colder temperatures following that in behind. In fact, some of these temperatures up here dropping below zero this afternoon on those northwest winds, gusting as high as 35 miles an hour there at St. Lawrence Island, and kind of in the 15 to 30 plus mile per hour range across the northwest, again behind the front. And then these northeast winds and the clear skies there, or push the clear skies out to the Pribilofs. Northeast winds 15 to 30 miles an hour. They're coming off the coast, actually extending up into the Yukon-Kuskokwim deltas to a point. And then we're looking at some clouds, kept at least the east side of Kodiak Island pretty cloudy today. Not really showing up too good here, but excuse me, some other cloudiness up along the North Gulf Coast. And gusty winds again today, 40 to 50 knot gusts from Stevens Passage up through Lynn Canal, and pretty brisk in areas down over the southern panhandle with lower pressure down in this area. But all this moisture will stay to the south as it looks right now, at least for the next day or two. And then back out to the west, old frontal boundary right through here provided rain the entire day across the eastern Aleutians here and on Alaska. East winds 15 to 30 miles an hour to go along with that. More of a on and off again type of rain pattern here over the Alaska Peninsula, both Sand Point and False Pass, carrying rain at times throughout the afternoon. And then this frontal boundary here just edged its way past Shemya this afternoon. Winds kicked around to the northwest at about 30 miles an hour with snow out in that area. And putting this, rolling this into motion again, this front right through here is gradually going to push eastward and then drop southward. Not expecting much weather with it, but those cold northwest winds here, high pressure back up over the eastern coast of Russia there around Wrangel Island. It's going to continue to circulate colder air southward, and eventually that's going to lead to some pretty significant changes, especially here over south central Alaska. We've had clear skies for several days now, light wind conditions. And you'll see for tonight, look for this weak low that's been lingering there to stay in this area. Still some light winds, really not much gradient with it, just a real weak circulation. So look for considerable clouds out along the coastline, right up pushing a little bit farther to the north and again back to the west. Areas of fog likely developing again tonight over south central Alaska, especially around Cook Inlet. In the areas they did this morning, you'll probably see a repeat of that again tonight. Still windy, no change here over the southeast coast, except maybe the winds continuing to diminish over the southern areas down there. But all that moisture will stay off to the south and southeast into southern British Columbia. Look for mostly cloudy to cloudy, maybe some drizzle and fog there for Kodiak Island, especially on the east side of the island. No change here for the Alaska Peninsula. Rain beginning to diminish and taper off, getting a little more occasional there over the eastern Aleutians. Snow showers out to the west. Mostly clear skies there. Should be pretty fair, definitely dry for the Pribilofs. And then here's the Arctic front right through this area. Again, no weather to speak of associated with that, just the colder air mass up here gradually is going to be pushing southward, and upper low is going to sneak into the northwest interior, identified by that trough back up in that area in the coldest core of the air aloft. Coming southwards, it's going to be pretty snowy with lower flying conditions there north of the Brooks Range, central North Slope areas back up toward the eastern Arctic coast. Then a break behind that until that next trough drops in tomorrow, coming down into this area and dissipating. Another one falls it in behind like that with a high pressure back here over the Wrangell Island area. So that's going to keep these northeast winds going pretty brisk. Could see gusts 30 to 35 miles an hour there, say Kivalina. Definitely through the Bering Strait, 15 to 20 or 25 miles an hour there for Nome and Golovin. And very brisk winds for St. Lawrence Island, but hopefully it'll keep the skies clear there with the clouds out in this area. And the frontal boundary right through here, the only weather will be, it looks like, from the Brooks Range northward, again over the eastern areas there, but that'll all be very light snow, and accumulations will be pretty minor and negligible. We have a weak low now that appears to be over northern Cook Inlet by this mile. Such a slack pressure gradient here that's really could drop them depending on which model you look at. The lows are kind of scattered around, but no wind associated with it. If it moves to this position, they'll probably draw some clouds and possibly some fog across much of Prince William Sound over to Cordova, but I think it'll stay nice. Look for sunshine there for Yakutat. And less wind tomorrow for the southeast coastal areas. Still a lot of sunshine. You may see an increase in the clouds here into the southern areas, but any snow showers look like they will stay over Dixon Entrance and southward or eastward there in Canada. So just look for lighter winds, maybe some warmer temperatures associated with that. No change for Kodiak, still some moisture, but very light moisture, probably resulting in some maybe IFR conditions here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. But staying VFR to the north, winds pretty light. In fact, very light winds here all the way out across the Aleutians. Basically high pressure, real weak low here, not producing much in the way of any windy conditions. But back up over the northern Bering Sea now, especially behind this front, winds will be a little stronger. And the outlook for Tuesday, got a low now combining with an upper level trough coming down. So we're looking at southwesterly flow aloft as the cold air sinks southward here across the western areas, and that's going to latch on to enough moisture and enough cooling of the atmosphere associated with the Arctic frontal boundary here. Looks like snow pretty likely, especially later in the day on Tuesday. Rather difficult to tell exactly when it'll begin, but definitely a pretty good chance of snow. I'd say snow likely. Could see several inches with this pattern before it ends. Also a trough will develop here along the North Gulf Coast to right off the northern southeast coast. So look for a chance of snow, mostly from about Yakutat, definitely Cordova, all of Prince William Sound. Pretty good chance of snow, especially as the day wears on. The chances will increase. And though different story for Kodiak, nothing but sun there. Another sunny day there across Bristol Bay, but that colder air beginning to push southward. Still the northeast winds here along the coast, but chance of snow now for the Pribilofs along this Arctic front. Clear to the north, clear and very cold. Gusty winds and temperatures struggling to rise above zero during the afternoon hours. And finally, some moisture and frontal systems beginning to push up to the western Aleutians for rain and snow mixed out in that area, and probably looking at some small craft advisories to go along with it. Temperatures this afternoon were in the 30s again across all of the Panhandle, and as well as the North Gulf Coast, 34 there at Cordova, 35 at Palmer, while Kenai had a 41. 36 up at Talkeetna, at 25 Gulkana, mid-20s through the Tanana Valley, and single numbers, Fort Yukon at 3 degrees, and then on the Arctic coast, temperatures ranged from 10 there at Kaktovik with snow at Dead Horse, back below zero now. The colder air finally beginning to seep into the western areas here, and those northerly winds pulling it southward. -9 at Tin City, 21 over at I believe that's Ambler, but single numbers here from Selawik back toward Kivalina with just 1 degree. The cold spot there at Cape Lisburn at -10. Lower 20s here along the Yukon Delta coast with a 28 degree reading at McGrath, while Galena had 27. Bethel up to 31 degrees today, and mid-30s to lower 40s here over the Bristol Bay area. 43 at King Salmon, down about 8 degrees or 9 degrees from yesterday, but lower 40s here along the peninsula. 40 degrees, clouds, rain, and wind there at Unalaska. 30s for the Pribilofs. A little more sun at St. George helped push them up to 37 degrees, and then 32 and snow out there at Shimia. Lows tonight below zero, of course, all across the northern areas down into the Tanana Valley. Nome probably staying above zero, say 5 degrees for the low tonight. 20s down to the south, 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, and teens and 20s for the Panhandle. And the highs tomorrow staying below zero here in this purple shaded area right up northeast to about Arctic Village. Otherwise, 20s and 30s to mid-30s over Bristol Bay. Lower 40s over the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians for the warmest part of the state. Otherwise, the Panhandle looks like you'll be mostly in the 20s. For flying weather, with that low back out here, look for some marginal VFR up along the North Gulf Coast. But again, I think that'll stay west of Yakutat, so it'll be VFR all the way down until you get to Dixon Entrance. VFR across all of the interior, and some of that moisture may slip down into the Koyukuk Valley for some flurry conditions, maybe back to the west toward the Kobuk Valley, but the IFR definitely will stay up along and north of the Brooks Range. IFR continuing here again from the Alaska Peninsula Pacific side across the eastern Aleutians and into the central areas. Passes Anatuvik, IFR in the northern entrance with marginal VFR now even on the south side. And for Adigan, IFR in the north, marginal to VFR south. Lake Clark and Merrill and Rainy, all looking VFR tomorrow, but tomorrow will probably be the last day that they remain open for the western Alaska Range passes. Windy, VFR through at least tomorrow, and Isabel and Mentasta will be wide open. Tanita, good VFR. Portage, no change. Chilkoot and White, no change at all. For the freezing levels, still looking at 2,000 to 4,000 foot heights here over southwest Alaska and Kodiak Island here. Upper level height retreating southward as an upper low comes down from the north there. Tomorrow morning at the surface here, say from St. George to Cape Newenham, and then hugging the coastline to near or just off the Panhandle. Icing threats, areas of light to isolated moderate rime probably. Possible clear, mostly below 6,000 feet, just a threat and nothing too serious showing up there, and then scattered stuff as well, the remnants of that frontal boundary out over the Aleutians. Upper level wind flow chart shows a trough coming in to about this position midday tomorrow, and then beyond that an upper low will develop and actually pull south-southeastward into the interior during the day on Tuesday and Tuesday night. That's why we've got snow in the forecast for south central Alaska as well as other areas around the state. While the upper low here over the south of the Panhandle keeps those northeast winds going, but that whole pattern is going to be weakening with each passing day. 9,000 foot winds, not too bad here over the southeast coast of this level, 10 to 15 knots, pretty light and variable across the southeast quarter of the state, and light also on the Arctic coast. The only really windy areas here, Kivalina down across the peninsula to St. Lawrence Island, otherwise 15 to 25 out of the east across the southeast Bering Sea. But even light variable winds there over Kodiak Island, and pretty light winds for the Aleutians as well. Even at 3,000 feet, just 5 to 15 knot winds, and that's about it for not only the southern Bering Sea, but from actually the Alaska Peninsula all the way out to Shimei and beyond. Light variable winds here, a couple of very weak low centers popping up at this level, but nothing in the way of wind associated with them, and light winds maybe up to 20 knots there, and that would be over the northern southeast coast, but you can see becoming quite light over the southern areas. And taking a look at the turbulence chart, moderate chop here from, say, Point Lay down across the northwest Seward Peninsula. Again, those gusty north winds producing that moderate chop, especially for small aircraft, all below 8,000 feet. Light isolated moderate, possibly down to St. Paul, but pretty smooth otherwise, right up to Bristol Bay. Maybe some light isolated moderate bumpiness here for the eastern Aleutians, and mechanical turbulence continues, but a lot less of it here, but there's still a threat of it, mostly over the inland areas of the Panhandle. And after the break, I'll return with a look at the marine forecasts.
Now, one of the things you want from a weather observation is the altimeter setting. So let's take a look at how a METAR does show the altimeter setting. First of all, the altimeter setting is really easy to pick up on a METAR because the field starts with the letter A, and that indicates that actually that it's reported in inches of mercury. But you can just remember it the same way by thinking that the A stands for altimeter, because it could just as well. So what you do is read all 4 digits and just put a decimal point in there. This altimeter setting is 29.92. Now let's assume the airport has a little bit of fog. I think this qualifies as fog right here. Well, you'd find out about fog in the present weather portion of the METAR report, but you might not find out everything you'd like to know about the fog. All it would tell you is that there's fog. Let's assume you'd like to know, well, what percentage of the sky is obscured by fog? Well, to find out something like that, you'd have to look in the remarks portion of the METAR report, and the remarks field is the last field in the METAR report, and it will always begin with the contraction RMK. Now, the remarks portion is divided into 2 parts. The first part is called automated, manual, plain language. Now, what that means is automated code, manual code, and plain language text. And what it does is, in general, that elaborates on something you found in the body of the report. It tells you more about it, just like we would in fog in this particular case. Now, this is the portion of the remarks section that the pilot is going to find most useful. Now, here are some of the contractions you might see in the remarks portion. You might see tornado, or AO1 or AO2, which tells you the type of the auto station, the automatic station there. Peak wind, wind shift, tower visibility, surface visibility, lightning, rain began, rain ended, and it'll tell you a time. Thunderstorm began, thunderstorm ended, that kind of information. Or it might tell you the size of the hail, or that there's Virga south, or that how much of the sky is obscured by smoke. Here it's 5/8 to 7/8 because that's the criteria for broken. Or you might find out the ceiling is from 400 feet variable to 800 feet. The pressure's rising rapidly, or the pressure's falling rapidly. Or you might find a sea level pressure. These are the kinds of things that you're going to find in the remarks section of the METAR. It's all very vital information. And it's also where the observer can add some plain language remarks to fully describe conditions at the airport to give you more information. Now, let's take a look at some examples of what remarks might look like. You might have a remark that says something like this. It might say peak wind from 280 degrees at 45 knots, and it occurred at 1.5 past the hour. You might have something like that. Or another remark might be something like this. Wind shift, there was a wind shift at 1.5 minutes past the hour caused by frontal passage. Or you might have a remark that looks like this, just a few examples of these things. You might have a remark that says that the hail began at 1:07 after the hour, and it ended at 4:0, and a thunderstorm began at 1:05 after the hour. The thunderstorm was overhead, moving east, and the hail is 3/4 inch in diameter. Not a great day, I would think. Now, let's take a look at another field, and that's the field of sea level pressure. You can see it down here. Now, the sea level pressure is always in hectopascals. No, that is not the name of a famous artist. That's not who that is at all. Hectopascals is the same value as millibars. To read it, put a decimal point in front of the last digit and either a 9 or a 10 at the front of it. Let's take a look at how we're going to read these now. Here we have sea level pressure. Put a decimal point in front of the last digit and a 9 or a 10 at the front of it, whichever one makes it closest to 1,000. So let's put a 10 in front of this one. That'll make it closest to 1,000. And it comes to 1013.2 hectopascals. Now, let's do another one. Here we put a decimal point in front of the last digit. In this case, to make it closest to 1,000, we'll put a 9 here, and you get 999.8 hectopascals. Now, once again, that's the same value as millibars. And finally, if you see CLP, SLP, NO, that means sea level pressure not available. Now, some other METAR remarks you might run into is something like this. You might see one that says, remark, and it means lightning is observed in the clouds. A thunderstorm began at 25 minutes past the hour. The thunderstorm is overhead, moving east, and the sea level pressure in this case is 13.2 hectopascals. Let's do a couple more. Let's take a look at remarks. Here's one. Here we have rain that does not reach the ground. What's the name of that? Virga is the name of rain that does not reach the ground. So we have Virga southwest. It means rain that does not reach the ground southwest. Let's do one more. Let's assume that we have a remark that looks like this. It says, the remark, the scattered layer is variable to broken at 1,400 feet. It indicates that you have a scattered layer at 1,400 feet and it's variable to broken.
Welcome back. Well, tomorrow look for those northeast winds up over the northern areas, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, down to Stevens Passage, coming down to about 30 knots with some higher gusts. Even lighter down to the south here, more of a 15 to 25 knot with range with higher gusts continuing. And then lighter winds out along the coast. And then for Tuesday here, big change. It looks like now with the high pressure area pulling off to the east, lower pressure back here to the west, you might develop some south winds. You'll definitely lose the north winds here over these northern areas and may even go south up to 15 in the afternoon. Therefore, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay may even reach all the way to Skagway. Off the coast, southeasterlies, 15 to 20 knots. Up the extreme south coast, just light variable to easterly at about 10 knots. Pretty light winds down here, variable to northeast, also at 10 knots. And then for south central Alaska tomorrow, light variable winds for Cook Inlet again with a lot of sunshine. But again, that light wind pattern could lead to some considerable low clouds and fog, especially the fog like we saw the last two mornings. Light winds all the way down into the Barren Islands as well as the North Gulf Coast, but kind of signifying that weak low circulation again with the center up in here somewhere. Southeast or southwest at 15 there along the east side of Kodiak Island as well as Shelikof Strait. And then taking a look at Tuesday, things still light but picking up a little bit here. Southwesterlies 15 knots all the way up into the central Gulf Coast, turning southerly at 15 and then southeast into Prince William Sound. Right now it only looks like a light breeze at about 10 knots. And general south to north wind flow for Cook Inlet, but very light, just 5 to 10 knots as well. For the Bristol Bay zone, northeasterlies at roughly 10 knots and barely a breeze here along the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Could see 20 knot winds at times in areas here for the the Pacific side, and then Sitkinak to Chignik east at 15. And then looking at Tuesday, light wind pattern continues. In fact, light variable conditions there southwest of Kodiak to northeast 15 from Chignik down to False Pass. Otherwise, pretty light conditions from the east-northeast at 5 to 10 knots. Bristol Bay on out to Cape Sarachev. For the Aleutians, not too bad wind-wise tomorrow. Northeasterlies or east-northeasterlies, 10 to 20 knots there across the Fox Islands. And pretty light wind conditions, as I mentioned earlier here for the central areas, and getting a little more variable as you head out to the west. And then the outlook for Tuesday, everything comes up. You get a pretty general wind direction and speed here with that next system edging its way northeastward across the area, northwest or northeast at 25. Easterlies 25 knots here with lighter easterlies at 15 to 20 for the Fox Islands. And up along the southwest coast, winds will range from 15 knots here coming out of Kuskokwim Bay, 20 knots across Nunivak Island. Brisk wind advisories out for St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots, higher gusts, high as 40 miles an hour. Much like today there, down into the northern Bering Sea, but only looking for 15 knot winds for the Pribilofs. Not much change in this pattern expected for Tuesday with St. Paul maybe coming up to about 20 knots. I can get the map there, it goes. Yeah, 20 knots, sea 7 feet for St. Paul and the Pribilofs there. No change though for the southwest coast, maybe a little lighter there in Nunivak Island northward, but staying in the brisk wind advisory zone there from St. Lawrence Island down into the northern Bering Sea and the St. Matthew marine area. Up along the Arctic coast, light winds generally kind of turning northwest here on the west side, 10 to 15 knots, and then westerly 10 to 20 knots, strongest winds over toward Kaktovik. Breezier conditions still could see some gusts up to 25 here for the western Capes 20 to 25 knot winds there across the Kotzebue Sound, Chukchi Sea area, and of course those stronger gusts again that always blow there at Tin City. So you're probably looking at sustained 30 or 35 knots through the Bering Strait. And then taking a look at Tuesday, not much change, just more northerly, but still light there for the Central Coast. Northeast now here on the west side, up to 25 knots for the Western Capes, mostly in gusts, and northerlies at about 20 there for the Chukchi Sea and in toward Kotzebue Sound. No change on the east side. Taking a look at tonight's forecast again, watching this Arctic boundary here, pretty dry for the most part. It's going to leave all the moisture behind up on the north slope there. Won't be able to get across the Brooks Range at all. Fair skies, clear skies with light winds over the central, southern interior. May see some clouds down here along the coastline, definitely for Kodiak Island, and still some moisture going on there for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian areas, but beginning to become a little less heavy and maybe more on and off. And no change here over the Panhandle, still some brisk northeast winds or east-northeast, varying greatly depending on where you are in this area. But the clear sky is extending offshore for a fair distance, so nothing but stars tonight there. And then for tomorrow, less wind now, high pressure weakening, beginning to pull off to the east and southeast a little bit. All of this moisture, you may see some clouds reach the southern areas here with a risk of a flurry, say for Heidelberg, maybe Metlakatla and Annette. But all that moisture, the bulk of it anyway, is going to stay off to the east or southeast. Still some clouds, areas of fog. That'll burn right off tomorrow for areas that develops here over the Cook Inlet and Susitna Valley region with the light winds. Snow, occasional light snow at times, or flurries there from the Brooks Range northward. But again, some of that may slip down into the Koyukuk and possibly the Kobuk valleys. But whatever does will just be in the form of flurries. Colder temperatures behind this front. And eventually that's going to link up with this low here and bring a pretty good chance of snow, especially as the day wears on Tuesday over all of south central Alaska, as well as the North Gulf Coast, to just off the coast of the Panhandle. Much colder conditions southward right up to this front, but still sunny in Bristol Bay. Well, have a great evening and thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.